Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I'm your host, Niti, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here in North Carolina. If you missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. We are a people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel, and we are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you. We are sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self-govern. If you have questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I'm joined on air with Greg Clarkson, regenerative farmer and an ASN on Kansas. And now I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Oh my gosh. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
We're here. We made it. Anna, so everybody's super excited. And, they really were loving our episode last week. Of course, everyone's like, so is it time? Is it time? Like everyone is asking about if it's this week, the banks, are the switches going on, and so it's really cool and fun. And I know some of the major questions are kind of centered around what is Trump's thing. I was looking for the questions where they're like wanting to know basically, is his Golden Jubilee announcement for April going to affect our Global Family Bank and AFD money? That's basically the bottom line, like around several of the questions here. What do you think about that?
Well, we're just going to seize upon whatever amount of the Patriot Fund belongs to us. Mm-hmm. Everybody in this country suffered. I mean, it didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter if you were military. It didn't matter if you were federal civil service. It didn't matter if you were Joe Average American. Everybody suffered as a result of the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there's a gigantic recoupment that's due just to everyone, right? But then the Americans are, we're the ones that were always most populous. I mean, how many federal workers and how many military workers really are there compared to the bulk of our population? So
we're the silent majority, right, Anna?
You're looking at about 12% of the population, and that's being generous.
Mm-hmm.
That were actual federal citizens. Okay. And so maybe 12% of that Patriots Fund belongs legitimately to federal employees. Okay. The rest belongs to us, to Joe Average American. And, that's part of what we're bringing forward is that, hey, you set up a situation that stole from your employers. This is a recoupment action. Okay. Mm-hmm. This belongs to us. It's under our control. It's not yours. Has nothing to do with you, really. And so we're going to have some discussions with Mr. Trump and his administration. Of course, the military wants to retain control of everything. And it's just not appropriate. The military is supposed to be under the supervision of the civilian people of this country. It's not supposed to be under military authority. And they've been functioning under the commander-in-chief. I gotta stop and take this a second.
Go ahead. I mean, maybe the doors are opening, Greg. That must be what's happening. All the bells and the whistles.
Yeah.
We knew it was going to be crazy week, y'all.
Yeah. With my computer problems, you can hear me okay, can't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Coming in loud and clear.
So, we talked last week. We ended the show last week with the discussion about Felix the cat.
Yes.
And what I love is Anna put out an article, The Land of Oz 1.0, right after that
Yes.
about Felix the cat. So
Yeah.
I'm on Kansas, Kansas, Dorothy associated with Oz. So I like the article that came out right after last week's podcast.
Yes.
Well, I think it hit a nerve with a lot of people when they considered, the concept of personage is not all that easy.
Yeah.
But they could see that there was a difference between the living cat, a painting of the cat, a photo of the cat, a drawing of the cat, a video of the cat,
Yeah.
that when we're talking about persons, we're talking about all these representations
Right.
of reality. Okay, so I think that was very helpful. I'm very glad that we struck upon that as an analogy for people to better understand the crime of personage and how it is connected to different jurisdictions.
Right.
So that was great. The continuing education has to go forward too, and now that they have the concept of personage and the example of the cat, they can begin to apply the same thing to money.
Yes.
With the actual gold and silver coins being the factual actual money, and all these other things, credits and debts and IOUs and promissory notes and all these different kinds of things are just they're representations of the actual fact, right?
Mhm.
And I think that helps people a lot.
Yeah. So we want to get back to this a little bit. So we have the land and soil jurisdiction here, which is
Mhm.
lawful. We've got the small p people on the counties. We've got the big P people are the states and the citizens representing that. Let's talk a little bit, Anna, if we can, about lawful persons who are the big P people. Because there's a big confusion, because the moment you say person, they go glitch, and they're all over here on the incorporated side. Because y'all, this is the incorporated, like federal, British, territorial, papal, municipal persons, and this is the veil, the hidden veil that no one even knew about for so long.
Right. Okay. You have a lawful person and you have a legal person or persons. Okay. And you can look at that as a lawful person is one step removed from the actual living man. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you have on your own little flat feet a living man standing on the soil of New Jersey. And you have a lawful person that is in control of the land jurisdiction underneath that soil all the way to the center of the earth. Now, the lawful person is a person. It's a representation of you just as much as the legal persons are, but it has a different nature. Just like a painting is different from a photo, is different from a video, is different from a drawing, is different from a pastel, is different from, it's a different representation of you. The lawful person functions under law with a capital L. It functions under common law, and it functions in trade. Your lawful person, which is standing under actual law and not statutory law, not legislative law, but actual common law and actual admiralty law, and also actual commercial law. Your lawful person is a means by which you can be identified in public and by which you can sue and be sued. Okay. But it has to be in a court of law, capital LAW, right? Not all caps, but upper lowercase, a court of law. All these legal persons on the other side of the veil are different kinds of representations of you. They're all legal persons. You have a British territorial person, you have a municipal person, and potentially you have all sorts of other persons too, called derivatives. Part of what you hear about with these quote unquote derivative markets are derivatives of persons, right? And once they issue these franchises in your name without your knowledge or consent, they're in control of those persons because guess what? They created those persons. Just this morning, somebody had put my name into an AI chat thing, and wanting to know about my hidden background, and it comes up with this thing. The whole thing with I had served time in federal prison and blah 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 blah. And I said, well, what do you expect? The IRS has an entire dossier on me that claims that I was a middle manager for a rum distillery in Barbados, and my husband was running guns in South America, and we were doing all this without stepping foot out of Big Lake, Alaska. Pretty good trick, don't you think? Well, they've got these fictional persons named after us running all over the world doing all sorts of things, and they're making up this entire fictitious world with fictional people going fictional places doing fictional things. Why shouldn't they go take their rum distillery manager and put it in federal prison? Doesn't make any difference to me. I'm not in federal prison. That isn't me. All right. It's my name that's been hijacked and misapplied to fictional entities. Okay. So it doesn't have a damn thing to do with me. It doesn't have to do with any taxes that I owed. It's all just part of a federal corporate money laundering scheme, really, if you want to get right down to it, an offshore money laundering scheme that is federally regulated. Okay, because what does the federal government get to regulate? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, interstate sale, manufacture, and transportation thereof. And you will note that every single dossier that the IRS has ever written in their funky coded master file has us out in the world doing something that is associated with interstate manufacture, sale, or transportation of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
Right. They're the only thing that they can manage, and firearms too. Let's just, we got this whole YouTube audience that doesn't know anything about what firearms actually are, because anything that we can hold in our hand and carry around is our arm. It's not a firearm. I mean,
firearms and the time and in the meaning of what that contract was about, allowing the feds regulatory control. Firearms means cannons, mortars, howitzers. It means, big guns. It does not mean deer rifles. It does not mean pistoles. Okay, firearms means big guns. So they don't even have any right to regulate the kinds of things that people think of as firearms. They don't. They claw desperately trying to, but no, that isn't what firearms means in the law that gives them regulatory control of firearms. Firearms means big guns, cannons, things that are gigantic. Missiles are firearms. 2,000-pound bombs, that's firearms. They're talking about military weapons, okay? And so, anyway, folks, we're living in a situation where so many lies have been told about so many people for so long. Do not be surprised if you get some sort of record attached to your name. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden Niti Valley shows up as a CIA agent assigned to Brazil. This kind of stuff is actually going on. Yeah. Where they are making up stories, literal narratives about us. They're taking these fictional legal persons into fictional legal court sittings and charging them with all sorts of crimes, sentencing them, processing their court cases and stuff. I was accosted by the IRS again, allegations of owing them money. And guess what? It was addressed to Anna M. Reisinger von Reitz in all capital letters, so very clearly a municipal franchise that had been created. And I wrote back and I said, no such entity exists.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's funny when they send us all this stuff and then they send us the vouchers right behind it. And, like it's just mail at this point. We're getting bombarded with this crazy mail. I didn't even know anybody was still there because we've been sending them things that I don't even know if they're receiving them.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you get these correspondences. These courts know that they're not supposed to be doing this now.
Yes.
They've all been given fair warning.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they just take a look, they send you these things in the mail, which is against the law, by the way. And it's the misuse and abuse of the mail to promote a fraud. But anyway, they'll send you these things. I don't know what your middle name is, Niti, but you'll see Niti B. Bally, for example, and there won't even be a dot after the B. It'll just be this, phantom letter that's hanging out in the ethersphere.
Yeah.
And
well, I've seen it. It's crazy. They just make up stuff. They've taken my maiden name. I don't have a middle name, but they make one up for me many, many times. They've taken my husband's name and made it my middle name before. One time they said they also take Rohit's name and they turn it into Robert, which is funny. I don't know why. So I was one time addressed as.
Time I talk to him, I'll call him Robert just for fun.
I know. So one time I got a piece of mail that said Niti Robert Bali. I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
They're like, I don't know if this is a boy or girl. They just put whatever, anything. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Run like an antelope away. Don't do that while we have time.
Valid.
Okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
So what I was curious about is let's take this discussion on, the living man, lawful person, legal person, and tie that over to the banks.
Yeah.
So we've got our global family commercial bank.
Mm-hmm.
It's fiat accounts on the land jurisdiction. Would that be the lawful person's name?
We don't have any of all of their stuff is legal tender, so it's on the bad side of the bar.
Okay.
But what we have on our side is credit units. And what we did was we made the credit units equal to the equivalent, the lowest common denominator, so to speak, that was established by the original exchange rate. Now remember, what they said in 1934 was out of the clear blue that one Federal Reserve note equaled one United States silver dollar, which equals 1 ounce of silver, right?
Mm.
So what's the common denominator? It's the 1 ounce of silver in the real world, right? Now, our credit is based on all of the goods and services that we gave in inequitable exchange for their IOUs, right?
Right.
So our credit is based on actual goods and services. Our credit is real. Our credit is good credit. Their credit doesn't exist, okay? So there's no credit on their side. There's only debt. So their Federal Reserve notes are debt notes. And what they do is they track the indebtedness of the federal government to us in the very first transaction round that goes on associated with those IOUs. Now, the reason that they had to have the Federal Reserve print those for them, they couldn't do it themselves, is that the Constitution makes it clear that the government, the federal government, operates on our credit, not on our actual assets. So they had to have some other entity come in and take the burden off them and issue them something that they could use as credit. So they issue these debt notes, these IOUs. Now, from the Federal Reserve side of it, okay, well, we're doing this favor for the government corporation, right? And so it costs us, say, 4 cents to print every bill regardless of face value.
Right.
That gives them a 96-cent profit on the $1 bill. It gives them a $4.96 profit on the $5 bill. It gives them a $9.96 profit on the $10 bill, and so on. So they make the seigniorage. That's the difference between the face value and the actual cost to print it. The Federal Reserve takes the seigniorage as profit for itself right straight off the top. Then it turns around and it bills all that cost, the entire thing, the cost of printing the bill and the seigniorage, plus interest, to the federal corporation. So now the federal corporation is holding the debt, right? Now that is what goes into the national debt. But what happens after that? Okay, so now the government has possession of their own debt, and they are going to spend it into the economy, right? So they spend the money into the economy. What happens then? Most likely they're going to spend it with their vendors and contractors, which just happen to be franchises of theirs. They're going to spend it with Raytheon and Boeing and, you know, all these big contractors. They're going to spend it with Microsoft. And they're going to pump up their own business interest by doing so, right?
Yep.
They're going to spend it with Amazon. They're not going to spend it with Niti Bali or Greg on Kansas, right?
Right.
So they're going to spend all this into the economy by giving it to their own franchise vendors. Okay, so now it's going to land in the general economy because the franchise vendors, of course, are going to go out and they're going to respend it. Because they're going to go to their suppliers, they're going to go to their chip manufacturers in China, they're going to go to Detroit, and they're going to buy cars for their corporate fleet, and you know all this stuff is going to spool on down on out into the private sector eventually. But each time that bill changes hands, guess what's happening? Actual goods and services are being exchanged for the same IOU.
Right.
So, you're using this IOU over and over and over and over throughout the entire life of that bill. And so you have to pay for one IOU, but you're recouping all these goods and services off this one IOU. You see the swindle?
Yep.
I mean, it's a total scam, and it generates huge profit for, those that are involved in this. But it asset strips the victims.
Yep.
All right. So then we come back at it in the recoupment action and we go, well, this is just an initial guess, but we are going to, for sake of a practical application, we're going to say that every bill changes hands at least 100 times. And as a starting point, we're going to use the value of that bill being exchanged 100 times as the basis for us to start our credit line.
Right.
Okay, so it turns out that when you do the math, it's like 3,678 trillion,
Right.
In
Which
credit.
Which is
basically-
million, which if you were to make, you guys, like $3 million a month, you would reach $1 trillion just for people to comprehend what this means, like, in 200 years. So it's not like you're like, this is an insane amount of money.
It's an insane amount.
But it's like you said, at the root of it all, the moment they stopped this 1 ounce of silver, so I buy something from Niti, I give her the silver, she gives me the goods, everybody's equal.
Right.
The moment that stopped, and I give her a 4-cent piece of paper, basically, and so she gave me goods, she got nothing effectively.
Right.
But then it perpetuated 99 more times on
Right.
average, or conservatively 99 more times.
Very conservatively.
So yeah, very conservatively. So 100 times, let's say $100 bill, got those goods and services for basically 4-cent paper being handed to them.
Right. A huge swindle. And so
Huge.
now we're coming back and we're recouping the credit side. And we are issuing credit units as what? The equivalent of 1 ounce of pure silver, because that's how the exchange rate was set up in the first place. And we're grandfathered in. Okay. So
Grandfathered in. I love Anna's explanation for grandfathered in, because we can go back to our provenance and establish what the relationship was with our grandfathers, and that was called grandfathering in.
Right. So they established that the Federal Reserve note is equal to 1 ounce of silver. We're saying, great, bueno, that's all right. We're going to make our credit units equal to the value of 1 ounce of silver, which is 33 FRNs in today's market. Okay, so we have our American credit units, which are equal to 1 ounce of silver. And we can discharge 33 FRNs for every American credit union. And they can't complain because, hey, everything we've done is completely lawful. Our credit is established on a lawful basis. They're the ones that pulled the scam. They're the ones that created all this debt, And so we're in a position where we can take the entire national debt, 37 trillion, their national debt, I should say, and we can offset it with 37 trillion in credit, which is going to be 1/33 of theirs. So you're looking at what, about 3 trillion. Okay, we can completely offset that national debt and just blow it away and not even feel it. Okay,
not even feel it.
Right, not even feel it. And it's the same for all other countries and their debts. You just say that you've got Vietnam. Vietnam has a national debt in dong. Right? Okay, well, so then you equivalence that to FRNs, then take the FRNs, divide it by 33, and that's how many American credit units it takes to buy and pay off the Vietnamese national debt. And bear in mind, we've got 3,678 trillion American credit units. So, say that.
Well, but they've been operating it as a one world corporatocracy government anyway, right, Anna? So isn't that still, are they counting all of that in hours, or do they actually count it for each of the countries?
They count it for each of the countries. Okay. Each country is a franchise. Okay. So we take over the whole thing. We pay off all the debt and we, do the recoupment on them. and suddenly we're back owning everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean everything. But then, the other people have been cheated in the same way we have.
Yes.
Okay, so they've been paying out their goods and services for phony baloney money, right? So they have to have their recoupment. And all of this has to be calculated for every country on earth.
Yeah.
And it's against their government, right? It's not against our government, it's against their government that they were working with their corporations. Boy, this is going to really belly out Macron in France.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
going to have him smiling out of the other side of his greasy face. Anyway, we have a hammerlock on it. We know what we're doing. We know the basis and the logic of what we're doing, and we can prove it to anybody. It's not arguable. They can't complain. They went into the debt. They engineered this system to evade the Constitution, which in itself was a criminal action. They created emergency powers for themselves that were never granted to them by any constitutional contract. They simply ginned that up out of thin air. There was a lot that Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe, just ginned up out of thin air. And one of those things that we're dealing with right now today as a current issue is the quote unquote restored republic. And, even though S.G. Anon got back to us, he said, well, I saw these actual papers that were filed at the Hague, and I know that this was done and that was true. But
At the Hegue. Sorry, but I just imagine all of those bad guys at the Hague, like Honest Abe being as honest as possible, right? That's what's going on there.
Yeah, Honest Abe was a tongue-in-cheek nickname. It was, yeah.
Right.
Honest Abe, right. No, the way this works is you have the Geneva Conventions that are land-based, and you have the Hague Conventions, which are sea-based, and you have the Hague Conventions are military, and the Geneva Conventions are civilian. Okay.
The Freemasons, right? So,
but look at this. We never had a civil war.
No.
They mischaracterized that. They misrepresented it as a civil war, when in fact it was not a civil war. Okay. It wasn't a war of any kind. Okay. It was a commercial mercenary conflict that they just arbitrarily called a civil war.
And murdered whoever was in their way, who wasn't operating on their agenda.
Right. Yeah. And so, Tim Turner can go dance at the Hague and get all of the stamps, bells, and whistles he likes, but it wasn't a war, so the Hague has no jurisdiction related to it. The Hague is about war and military occupations and rules and regulations stemming from the Lieber Code that Abraham Lincoln established in fraud way back when. It doesn't have a thing to do with our situation here, because we suffered a mercenary conflict, and we can prove it was a mercenary conflict. And how do we prove it was a mercenary conflict? Number one, there is no declaration of war by any Congress.
Yeah.
We have searched for a declaration of war issued by any Congress, any viable sitting Congress, at any time related to the quote unquote American Civil War, and we are prepared to stand here on our flat little feet and say, we've looked for it for 25 years. We say it doesn't exist. If you get a declaration of war from Congress related to the American Civil War, bring it. Otherwise, shut up. All that we've ever found is a declaration from Abraham Lincoln acting as commander-in-chief. And as you can see by reading any of the federal constitutions you please, the only ones that have the right to declare war is the Congress.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no declaration of war by Congress related to the American Civil War. And there is, what else? There is no peace treaty.
Peace agreement, yeah.
Right.
There is no peace treaty ending the quote unquote American Civil War.
There
And
is
if it
now
was-
because we did that, but yeah, they didn't do that.
right, they did not do anything related to that. And so, again, you say it's a war, show us the peace treaty.
Yeah.
Okay. And they can't. It doesn't exist. There is no such beastie anywhere. What happened at Appomattox was the surrender of an army and an armistice. And what ended the First World War? An armistice. What actually ended the Second World War? A series of sea treaties, no land treaties.
Mm-hmm.
No
Paris
valid
treaties.
land treaties.
Yeah.
Okay, again, what you've got is a situation where mercenary conflicts have been misrepresented as wars.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been processed under the law of war, even though they're not owed the law of war.
Right.
What they are is they're owed criminal law. These were illegal mercenary conflicts that were inflicted on our people under false and deceitful, fraudulent misrepresentations. And so, it doesn't matter if Tim Turner, acting under the common misapprehension that the Civil War was actually a war, goes to The Hague and makes this common misrepresentation that it was a war, and all the people at The Hague are bamboozled and put stamps on his paperwork. That doesn't address our situation. Our situation is a civilian action that's a crime that we reported 10 years before Tim Turner ever showed up. We made our claims 10 years before he even appeared. So there's no doubt that we have a prior claim, that it's in the correct jurisdiction, that it is a criminal complaint as well as a recoupment action, and that it was made against the principals.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you see, we basically, they're talking apples, we're talking oranges, and our oranges can be proven, their apples can't.
This is very important. This is all. I hope everybody is catching all of this as we move forward with the. Sorry, go
That's
ahead.
what I'm thinking too. As we move forward,
Mm-hmm.
we talk about the silver, the American Credit Unit,
Mhm.
Yeah.
33, basically 33 to 1, because based on the original establishment of 1 ounce of silver.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think, historically, silver has been tied to America
Mhm.
as a means of, so I'm trying to think, if we go out into an international trade,
Mhm.
we would go out and internationally trade most likely in AFD, which is gold backed. Is it typical to be international in gold and national in silver?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. But you can use silver if you don't have gold.
It's still an asset. Yeah.
You can use platinum. You can use different assets. But the important part for us is that the equivalency is there.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so all across the board, it's fair, it's stable, it's set in cement. It's been that way since 1934. Our credit unit will be equivalent to 1 ounce of silver.
Okay.
And that is a lot of gain for us over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, not only do we have this humongous amount of credit that's owed to us, but we also then have the ability to cancel out entire national debts without even feeling it.
Right.
And in this way, we can just completely overturn the system that the enslavement racket that they set up. And as for our military needs to get its head screwed on. They need to understand very firmly that what begins in fraud ends with the end of the fraud.
Right.
And the entire quote unquote American Civil War was fraudulently misrepresented as a war when it's actually an illegal mercenary conflict that was foisted off on us by our public employees. And so this is a key understanding that there is no congressional declaration of war related to the quote unquote American Civil War. And there is no peace treaty ending said conflict. So there is no war. It's just a continuing mercenary conflict. So what we need to do is shut down this illegal occupation of our country, this illegal conversion of our military into a mercenary force, and just put an end to this. And the military can help. The military needs to understand that they are not operating as honorable soldiers, and they are not protected under the law of war or any kind of state immunity whatsoever for their acts. They are acting as cheap mercenaries. And they, in order to get home and to be assimilated back into a proper military and to have a proper relationship with the people of this country, they have to have amnesty because they have committed gross crimes and acts of treason against their employers, the people of this country. Now, they've done so because they were kept in, right? I mean, how many of our military would have signed up to serve if they'd realized that they were signing up as mercenaries?
Right.
Okay. So they didn't know.
The British of all people.
Right.
Right.
I mean, order following is still immoral. I mean, we have to take responsibility on some level, friends, So especially when you know what you're doing is not right. And a lot of guys were figuring those things out. And were, and they knew that, okay, we don't want to really participate in this.
It's a tough situation. It's a tough situation.
It is. Right.
It's a very tough situation, and it requires amnesty, and we've offered them amnesty.
Yeah.
So they need to come home. They need to lawfully convert the military back into a national military. They need to come under the regulation of the civilian government, which is us, the people, not persons, people, and they need to realize that the law of war does not apply to what they've been engaged in. Everything that's happened since the Civil War is tainted by it.
Yeah.
So all the assets, the ships and the planes and the missiles and all that, were paid for with our credit. They're ours.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's pure and simple. That was goods and services that were handed over in exchange for the 4-cent paper from Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and whoever else.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of which they've dumped all over the world, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Biden and the Taliban gift.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's insane. Anna, I've got a question from South Africa, if I may.
Yeah, that has to be the first and last question today, because I have to go accompany my beloved husband. This is the only time he could get a dental appointment.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just get this in there then. So South Africans are saying that this podcast happens at 3 a.m. their time. And so they sent me a message, and it says, 8 to 10 months ago, almost everyone here got talked into signing up their on-hands bond monies with the MCT, Monte Cristo Trust. As we were led to believe there would be no redemption centers outside the USA. There were 54 pages of legalities here to get it all registered on their system. But if Anna is now saying that we're being screwed by unscrupulous brokers and will only receive 10 to 20% of the full amount, does that mean that we are now obliged to only exchange through them? Or can we say we can get the full value through GFG Bank when the time is right and reject their lousy offer?
Well, I don't have the trust instruments in front of me, so I can't tell you what you obligated yourself to. I can tell you that the situation here is very much a fraud scheme where the military is offering to act as the broker and to control what you can spend your money on and how you can receive back your money, whether it's as FRNs or as gold, they're actually trying to take the gold bonds from the ZIM and re-inject it into the Federal Reserve System, which isn't going to work because everybody knows how crooked the Federal Reserve System is. So then they'll try to recoup and reboot using the IMF, and that won't work either because everybody knows how that works also. So, the military just needs to, suck it up and come clean. That's all they need to do. Mr. Trump needs to admit that he's not doing this auditing because it's out of the goodness of his heart. It's because it has to be done to settle the bankruptcy of the United States Incorporated. The military needs to come home. The generals need to realize that they've been engaged in non-military activity, that they've been engaged in mercenary activities ever since the Civil War. The rank and file needs to understand that they have been deceitfully inducted under conditions of non-disclosure. They have thought that they were signing up to be honorable sailors and soldiers, and instead they've been signing up to be cheap mercenaries. And when I say cheap, I mean cheap. They are serving. Our guys haven't had a real raise since the 1960s. They've had cost of living increases that keep them at parity with inflation. But our airmen first class, the people coming in as privates and as airmen and as, entry-level naval enlisted are so poor they can't afford food. They have to get food stamps. They haven't had a real raise since the 1960s. Okay, that's the truth. And it makes them the cheapest mercenaries on earth. And that's why they're constantly working for some big company that comes in and hires them to perform. Now, what's really shaking things up is that Europe can't hire us to perform anymore. Okay. And so the only one here with the muscle to defend Europe against anything is us. Mm-hmm. And Europe, it's ridiculous. I've seen the actual figures, but it's pathetic. It's like Britain has 55 tanks and 10,000 soldiers.
Wow.
Keir Starmer is going to commit them boots on the ground against Russia. Gee, all 10,000 against the 700,000 Russians. Yeah, right. Mm. Yeah. And Germany isn't much better. They have something like 1,500 tanks and and France has nukes, but they have them as defensive weapons. They have to be actually attacked before they can let loose their nukes. So, this is ridiculous. It was all predicated on us being at their beck and call, ready to be hired as cheap mercenaries and sent into that killing field. And Trump took one look at that and said, not me. Not going to happen on my watch. I don't want that on my record. And so now, Macron and Merz and all these other characters over there in Europe, they don't have any kind of armament of their own. They don't have standing armies of their own. They don't have any way to defend themselves against Russia. If Russia decided to roll, they'd just roll right through, right over to the hell. They'd probably leap over the English Channel in a jump.
It just goes to say we've been giving away our goods and services. They've been stolen from us. But right. Even worse, insult to injury, is our living men and living women have been taken from us for nothing.
Right.
For nothing.
For fraud.
Yes.
So, and that's irreplaceable. Obviously, we can get the credit back, and we can get that side of it, but you can't replace the men and women we lost, and so it's going to be a difficult situation to make this right. But it is what it is.
It can be. In some ways, it never can be made right.
No, it can't. It can't.
But, I've got to go, and I love you all. Our financial situation here is pretty desperate, everybody. I just want to let y'all know, everybody listening to the podcast, we have made some advances. We are just a little bit short in getting our generator. I think it's $300 now to get the generator replaced. And, it's all this little picky stuff that just affects our daily operations in different parts of the country. So I got to go. I'm being paged.
Okay.
Here, guys.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
All right. So we will be back next week with more answers, you guys. We did get a lot of good information like we always do. It was fantastic that Anna was able to stay with us for the 50 minutes that she was. There's a few things here in the chat, Greg, I thought you and I could take care of probably also.
The American Credit Union was American Credit Unit was a good discussion. I hadn't had that depth of discussion on that. So that was really helpful for me.
Yeah. I don't think we're getting prosperity cards, you guys. At this point, from what we were told, I mean, Gregory, maybe you can help me with this, but I was pretty sure that we have QR codes that we can make on our accounts. And I know that there are a lot of changes happening on the bank, and they keep taking the tools box away from everybody's account because a lot of people are playing with the tools. So if you've been messing around with the tools on your GFG account, you probably lost your toolbox, and they might put it back later when they're ready, but it interferes with whatever it is that they're doing on the other side. And so I definitely know people lose it. Some people won't get it back for a while. Some people can try to put a request in. What I know is that I don't think that Anna or the bank are trying to do anything to make it difficult for people once everything actually goes live. But it's not live. And when it is live, I can't imagine you're going to be missing the bits and bots that you need to be able to create your QR code. But I think that's going to be the first, from what I got out of it from Anna, that was the first thing, right? Because I know that they're linking at some point a code to our credential card. Or at least that was an idea.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. Yeah, on the tools, I suspect everybody's a little bit different, but I have the tools. I have the Create Pay link, which it's not live.
Right.
But if there's a list pay now links, I've got some information there. I suspect it's some of the testing they've been doing. I don't know if everybody does. I would assume most people do. So, but yeah, it's just sort of waiting for it to be live. And, I'll be curious to see how we set it up as well. Is it links? Is it tied over to the credential cards? What's the tie to the account? Because ultimately, as we were discussing last week, I've got 3 different accounts set up. I've got the Prosperity Union account, I've got the trust account, and I've got a vendor account for the farm.
Right.
So the trust account is really there for FRNs, for the safety vault. But the vendor and the Prosperity are there for AFD. So then would those have, obviously they would have 2 different QR codes or 2 different accounts. So, then the question is, what would the vendor account tie to if the Prosperity account tied to my credential card? So yeah, I've got just
the vendor account. The vendor account is our business account.
Yeah.
So only anybody.
Whoop, you're muted. You just muted, Niti.
Can you hear me now?
There you're back.
That's weird. I can't hear you. Hold on.
Oh, something made noises.
Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. I don't know. That was weird. What were we saying?
The vendor, you were talking about the vendor account.
Oh yeah, our vendor accounts are our business accounts, and and the other accounts. So I have my toolbox. It says Create Pay Link now. It says list Pay Now links. I know that we're going to be able to use credit versus AFD based on what the vendors are going to want when we work with them, because all businesses get to choose what form of payment they want to receive or not receive, or what they're going to honor. So some of them will take the AFDs, some of them will, work with the credits. So they get to choose at that point. But yeah, I think that the only thing I know is that if y'all keep messing around with the buttons, because I know it's really tempting to play with the buttons, then it messes stuff up when they're working. And then they basically, will start removing your access. And then they probably will put it all back. But hopefully they're going to put it back in time. So don't mess around with it, you guys. Don't mess around with it too much. Anyway.
Well, I had a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I think this worked out pretty good.
Me too. This is great.
Another good session with Anna. So
yeah. So we'll just see everybody next week. We love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next Tuesday.
bye.